Millennials are America's largest, most educated generation in American history. A generation of ambition, education, and progress facing an uncertain reality. Born into an era of economic chaos, they face challenges far beyond what they were told to prepare for. They've had to rethink traditional milestones as they enter adulthood during global uncertainty. Their struggles mirror those of a generation before them, Japan's lost generation. The same story, different country, different time. America's lost generation goes beyond the numbers to capture the unique ways this generation is reshaping their future, in their own words. It's a story of real people, authentic challenges, and untold resilience. Explore the stories and reflections of America's Lost Generation by Cameron Cohen. Available now at soupllc.com.
Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we are joined by Marc Koehler. He is a former nuclear submarine officer turned turnaround CEO, and he helps teams through chaos and how to deal with chaotic situations. I can't imagine anything more chaotic than traveling under the water in a large tube powered by the sun. So that presents multiple opportunities for insanity. So we're going to learn a little bit about him, his past, and what he does, and how to lead a lot of people through chaos. So welcome, Mark, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Yeah, Cameron, thanks for having me here.
Thank you very much. Well, let's begin, I think, from the beginning, which is tell us a little about yourself. And I don't know that you've written a book. I wasn't sent any details. So I normally say tell us about yourself in your book. Why don't you just tell us about yourself and we'll go from there.
That's fantastic. Yeah, so born in Rochester, New York. In 1986, I'm a junior at the State University of New York in Fredonia. And I'm studying physics, and there's this little known movie that comes out. It's called Top Gun. Have you heard of it? But anyways, I see it 4 times in the first 4 days, and on the 5th day, I'm in the recruiting office in Buffalo, New York, going through all the tests to become a jet fighter pilot. Pass all the tests with the exception of one, because I'm sitting there at the end of the day. Recruiter comes out and says, "You did great on all of them, but there's one of them that we have to have you retake." And I was saying, "Am I colorblind? Did I not see the horizon right?" And he says to me, "Your thigh bone's currently 3/8 of an inch too long to sit in a jet." Now, Cameron's sort of hard to see, but I'm 6'5". And so we retake the test. I get it down to within 1/8 of an inch, and I get disqualified. So as I'm walking out of the recruiting station, I'm crushed. All my dreams of serving my country, and ever since I was very young, I wanted to fly. All of that stuff basically vanishes. But as I'm leaving, the recruiter must have needed one more recruit that month. He was throwing everything at me. "What about helicopter pilot?" I was like, "No." "What about surface ship?" I was like, "No." "What about SEAL team?" "No." And then he says, "What about elite nuclear submarine force?" And I think, Cameron, the word elite turned my head around, and I said, "Send me some information on it." And he sent me some information on it, and I was a combination of intrigued, as a combination also of being intimidated. It's a very hard program. And so I decided to sign up for the nuclear submarine force and challenge myself. And, I call it my 1/8 of an inch moment. It's something that I didn't have control over. But I look back now, literally 35 years later, I'd be in a totally different place had I gone to fly jets versus what I'm doing right now. And it took me down a tremendous path. I mean, I was 23 years old, helping to lead, 110 people, billion-dollar nuclear submarine, missions critical to national security, 10 months of the year under the surface of the ocean. And, this is my first job out of college. So I was just like, okay. And I loved everything about it. But what I didn't love, Cameron, was we were out at sea 10 months of the year.
My dad was a Navy man around the same time. He went in 83.
Yes.
He was in college in the Tacoma area, and at that time the base in Bremerton was still active, and he saw the ships in the Puget Sound and Bremerton and said, "I don't want to take another finance class." His father was an accountant. "I cannot take another finance class. That's where I need to be." And so so he was off for the life afloat.
He
So,
was.
and he purposefully did not date or get married till after he was done because he was gone too much. And then, irony of ironies, he starts working in the weather where he was also gone 6 to 8 months a year, and that was
Yeah.
my whole childhood. And he is retiring this September, and my
Yeah.
mother, after 30 almost 35 patient years, is so ready to be done. That's all she
Yes.
talks about. I talked to her the other day. She's like, I'm ready to be done with NCAR. I'm ready to be. She is counting down the days.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine. And Cameron, at the time I was single, but I had 110 crew members. Average age is 23 years old. And so we had 60, 70 people who were married, and I saw them missing like key moments in life,
Yeah.
birth of a child and first day of school. And I'd grown up in Rochester, New York, where my mom and dad had run a hairdressing shop off the end of our house. And well, I loved everything about the training and leadership and execution at the highest level and serving the country. I didn't love being gone. I just knew that wasn't the long-term lifestyle for me, and that is why I got out. And I was stationed in Bremerton for a little bit in the shipyard there, and but had a tremendous experience in the submarine force. I got out and I fell into doing turnaround work.
Mm.
So I would go into companies that were struggling, have some type of challenge, and they would have 9 months, a year of cash before they were going to run out or needed some type of infusion. And I went into these stressful situations to help try to turn companies around. And when I first went into those companies, I tried to use the big business tools that were used on land. I found out they didn't work so well, put a lot of too rigid of a framework. And I just went back to my time in the submarine force and Cameron. I just started pulling stuff forward. How do we get 110 people, average age 23 years old, operate this, the most advanced piece of technology in the world, 800 people of service, life and death decisions. And I took pieces of this and then I translated them so they worked on land. And I created this over 3 decades. I created what's called fast attack leadership, which is the 5-step framework that nuclear submarine officers use on top secret missions. It's what anyone can learn so they can create fully aligned, highly adaptable, world-class teams that can execute at the highest level in highly disruptive environments. And so that's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing fast attack leadership.
Excellent. Well, I think then the logical question then to ask would be, what is it that makes a good and effective team?
So it's interesting what makes I think there's core aspects that make a good and effective team. But I think over the past 15 years, as things have continued to accelerate, what we find is that many leaders are still using an old set of leadership skills and tools that are built for a world that no longer exists. So a world that's much slower, that has a lot less disruptions. So the number one tool that makes a great team is that everyone is deeply connected to the mission. You can imagine on a nuclear submarine where there's thousands of life and death decisions being made every single day, where people are working in watertight compartments basically by themselves for 6 hours at a time. There's a lot of decision making that needs to be pushed down. If you want to push decision making down in your business today, because we find so many leaders are still working so much on the business, less in the business, the first thing you have to do is an engaged employee, an employee who feels deeply connected to the mission, is a highly productive employee. And so the number one key ingredient of a really strong team is people are deeply connected to the mission that their company is doing, and they know how what they do makes a difference in the world. So that's number one. Number two is every team that I've been on that's been an elite level team, everyone on the team is viewed as a leader, and everyone views themselves as a leader. And so, Cameron, just think this: we have two companies. Say one company is 200, both companies have 200 people in it. One company describes themselves as 20 leaders leading 180 employees, and they're competing against another company that views themselves as 200 leaders. Over the long run, which company is ultimately going to win. It's the one with 200 leaders. And, I really got this from the submarine force because, 600 people at the surface of the ocean, when a fire breaks out in the engine room, the person responsible for putting out the fire is the person closest to the fire when it breaks out. So whether you've been on board for 3 days or 30 years, all we needed to know was, are you going to be able to step in, step up, and lead? So the second key ingredient is that everyone is viewed as a leader and everyone views himself as a leader. I'll give you one other key component. There's a lot of them, but I'll give you a third one. The third
this is very good.
Yeah,
Keep going.
the third is that leaders get out of the way and they push decision making down and they allow their people to be involved in decision making. And so this is really important. In the submarine force, we had a saying that said, the vessel that's going to win is the one that make the most smart decisions the fastest. Most smart decisions the fastest isn't you as a leader of your business making all the decisions and pushing those down. It's about teaching everyone at every layer of the organization to push down. Now, this might surprise some people. The captain of a U.S. nuclear submarine knows every answer to everything that's on the submarine, but is only involved in 1% of the daily decisions that are made every single day. And so what's happened is you teach people how to become great individual decision makers, and you teach people how to become great collective decision makers. And then the decision making isn't involved just at the top in a few. It's pushed down to the layers where it needs to go down. And this is something that all organizations and all leaders struggle with. They feel like they have to be involved in decision making, and they always have to have their hand in it. They feel like that's their role. And really, your role today is you have to be more of an arbiter of knowledge and experience and bring that to situations that come up. And that's how you effectively manage change, and that's how you drive success. And so those are the top. I mean, there's more, but those are the top three ingredients for having a world-class team today.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that having that pushing the decisions down, I think is very hard for people who, and I suffer from this. I'm used to doing it all myself. So, and there's a certain amount of control that's involved in that. And I think a lot of founders, as they start to begin to hire staff and things start to grow and start to scale, that transition is very difficult because you're used to doing it all and being involved in every small thing. And it can be hard to give that up, especially that control aspect, and to genuinely sometimes not know exactly what's going on, but trusting the people who are doing it are going to do a good job. Kind of whatever that is. I work in book.
And what I would say with Cameron, you're not alone. Like, I went through a program that taught me how to push decision making down. I even do it at my company, and my employees are like, "Hey, don't you teach us thing about pushing decision making down?" It's just something that we want to be involved. We think we're serving people, and really we're not. So.
No, and I know I'm working book publishing, which is much lower stakes. And well, there's no stakes in book publishing. But we're getting ready to start scaling, and we're having to really, build systems and all this sort of thing. And that's no easy thing on its own. But I think the hardest part, especially for the founder, is he does not want to be involved in decision making, but also loves to micromanage. And we're also kind of also doubly difficult because I'm used to just doing it all, and I can do it very fast, get it done, move on to the next thing, and we have no shortage of things to do. And unfortunately, I think between the two of us, we have never fostered the staff to make decisions on their own. And now we're getting to the point where they really need to, and it shows. It shows, and so we have these conversations like, I really, wish people would, would do this and, and move this forward on their own. It's like, when would they have had the opportunity to? We've never let them, you know. But then we also both acknowledge that we can't run this company on the back of my heroics to walk into a project, save it and fix it for
Right.
a client or whatever have you. Like, that's not scalable, sort of thing. It's just like, so really we've both got to let go, which is inevitably a very hard thing to do.
Yes.
And so that's I think that sort of that pushing decision making down, I think, is hard for a lot of people who are used to doing it all, or who have been very involved for a long time. But I think, to your point though, you end up with more leaders, you end up with people more empowered, and you end up with unexpected things you might have never thought of on your own, or results you would have never gotten on your own, because you've got all of these people going in the same direction.
Yeah. Remember when we learned how to drive a car?
Mhm.
Some, parent was sitting or someone was sitting in the driver's seat, and you had your hand on the wheel. If every single time there was something that came up on the road, or they saw something, they took the wheel, what would you do as the driver? You just go hands off. I'm just going to wait, until they take the wheel. And this is something that, if we can think of as leaders, is every single time we jump in. I mean, there's this really famous saying from a woman. I went to her course, and I'll get her name, but she said, "We do a disservice to others when we do for them what they can and should do for themselves." And this was a course that was put on by U.S. Soccer of how do you push decision making down? How do you take and transfer the knowledge that coaches, like top level coaches, have? How do they transfer that to the players who are on the field, so they become great individual and great team collective decision makers? And it's a really powerful process called guided decision making that you can go through. Can I share more on what that looks like? And maybe this is something, Cameron, you can start implementing for yourself.
Yes, please do. I think that's very exciting.
Yeah. So I get asked all the time, how do you make this shift? Because you're used to being involved in everything. You think you're serving everyone. Everyone's got their hands off. They might be afraid to make decisions because they're not exactly in line with how you make decisions. And there's this concept called guided decision making. And in guided decision making, we'll just go through an example. So an employee comes to you and says, I don't know whether we should go with option A or option B. You know the answer is option A. The easiest and fastest thing to do is just say it's option A. They go away, they implement your decision, but they might have to come back to you again in the future if that same scenario or something near it comes up, because they don't know the factors behind that decision. So in guided decision making, and this is what every leader can do, is the only rule that you have is you can never tell them the answer. You have to guide them there through a conversation. And so in guided decision making, Cameron, what happens is an employee comes to you and says, I don't know whether we should go with option A or B. You know the answer is option A. You can't tell them that. Your response back to them is not what the answer is. Your response back to them is, what do you think? And so as a leader, anybody who's listening to this to right now, I want you to get really comfortable with that question, because you should ask them, what do you think? If they go A, that gives you an indication they don't know the factors behind that decision, or they're not confident in it. In guided decision making, you would ask them, what are the factors you take into account to make that decision? They say, here's 3 things. You know there's 4. You would tell them the 4th, but then you wouldn't say that's why it's option A. You would pause and say, knowing those are the 4 factors, what option should we take? They say option A, and then you say that's a great decision. And in the future, if it's $75 and less, I want you to make that decision all day. So the number one thing that leaders can start doing is to answer every single question with a question back. What do you think? Now, 2 things are needed for this. You need tremendous patience because you already know the answer. And number 2 is you need time. You need time. It's easier to give 6 seconds, it's option A, versus a 3 or 4 minute discussion. But if you do this, if you start asking and choosing times where you ask a question back, You're going to responsibly push decision making down, and then you're going to level the playing field of how decisions are made. And one thing that people don't really understand as a benefit, Cameron, if I'm doing something and then I empower you to do it, I'm not giving you like, hey, just do extra work, but I'm empowering you to do it. What you find is that that person gets more engaged. They're like, wow, Mark trusts me to make that decision that he used to make. So this actually starts a cycle where once you get someone engaged, you give them more responsibility and engages it even further, and it keeps going around and around. So the number one thing that you can do, very, very simple, sometimes very hard because you just want to answer the question, is every question that you get asked, ask a question back. What do you think?
No, I think no, that's very good. I laugh about the empowering part. I am in my current media gig. I am the I'm actually I'm 2.5 years in, and I'm fairly new. Most everyone else has been there 4 or 5 years now, and it's kind of a bit of a night and day difference. And when you were talking, I realized that because of my background in publishing and publications and all this type of thing, that I wasn't new to this industry. Others were, and I was not.
Hmm.
I was empowered to make a lot of decisions myself very early on. And there's a lot of things that I can just, many things that I sign off on, boss never knows about it, sort of thing. There's, money goes out, which I'm sure he's aware of if accounting calls him, but, it just sort of happens because he always has trusted me to never do anything that he wouldn't do or wouldn't like, sort of thing. Um, but I realized that came from a place of empowering very, very early on,
Right.
because he was kind of looking for a mini him. And I had the experience in the background for that, which is one of the reasons how I got into this sort of thing. But I also was thinking about how, we complain about the staff doesn't necessarily think strategically. We've never empowered them to do that. Ever. Not once. He and I will be talking later today. I'm going to bring up this conversation. And so, but
Perfect.
I no, I mean I think that's so crucial. Like it's like you're asking people to do something you've never empowered them to do it, so there's no wonder they're not doing it, sort of thing. Um, and I mean, that is just, I think there's a lot, because I've worked with a lot of small, medium-sized businesses. There's a lot of businesses like that where people are inert because they've never been taken seriously. They live in fear because an awful personality is in charge. Been in a couple of those. But yes, but I think if you want to get that first part of pressing down decision making, you have to empower people to feel comfortable, you know, doing that and making those decisions to begin with. If you never let them do it, it'll never happen. But those are the same people that will be the first to complain it's not happening, sort of thing. um
Let
so
me just
that's
add, let
yeah.
me add something to this. A lot of leaders that we come in touch with, they just say, like if it's me, I just go, silently, I'll just go like, there's no way Cameron's going to be able to do it the way I do it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do it on my own. And then the first time that I give you something to do, you might not do it exactly right. And like you said, I've never taught you how to answer that question. So you don't do it very well. And then what do? I just take it back.
Right.
And I equate this to, if you want to start like you're teaching someone how to ride a bicycle. You don't start on a 10 speed on a downhill. I have 3 daughters. I didn't put them 10
Yeah.
speed on a downhill. We had the bike and it had the wheels and they had all the stuff on. And once they got some confidence and understanding the balance, then I took the wheels off and I'd run behind them. They'd fall over. And then I'd run behind them, pretending my hand was on the back. And they would go, was your hand on the back? I go, yeah, it is. And then we'd stop and I go, it wasn't. And then they take off. So, so if you want to start this, there's tremendous confidence that comes when you can start making smaller decisions and they feel that confidence that they can make those smaller decisions and then slowly ramp it up. And for every person, it's going to be a little differently. Cameron, you might accelerate a lot faster than someone else, but you just have to understand where each person is. And then ultimately, you will get everybody to riding at 10 speed on a downhill. So get past the barrier of going like, hey, they can't do it. Don't give them huge decisions. Start out with the really small decisions.
Yes. I thought also builds confidence in people that, oh, they made a decision, they did something, they got there, and those little wins pile up over time. And then when it's time to take on something big, then there's
Yes.
that reservoir of confidence is there, which is so important. Um so but I always laugh. I was thinking about this before I hadn't mentioned it. I always laugh about how people used to get jobs in this country. You said you fell into doing this. How did you exactly get into doing this? Like, because it's not like there's a job listing for this sort of thing.
Yeah. So it's interesting. There was a company called Sirius Interim, and Sirius is Cerius. And what they did is they were one of the first companies that where a company could go to, and there would be a bank of expertise that was there.
Mm.
And so a company would come and, as an example, they would say, hey, we're really struggling with manufacturing. And I didn't start off, Cameron, same thing. They didn't put me on a 10 speed on a downhill. There was a operations manufacturing role, director of operations, that I went into the company and I was able to turn the company around and turn that situation around. And I got confidence about being able to do that. The next role I went in, I was the VP of manufacturing. The next role I went in, I was the chief operating officer. And then the next role, I was the president. And so it took 2 or 3 years for me to even be able to learn and be able to do that. So when I say I fell into it, it was a lot of grinding, and it was starting out at a lower level and then moving up. So that's how I made that transition. But it was through that company. And then second thing is when when you when you go into a company and you turn it around, and the person's a business owner, and this is a third generation company, and they have the pressure and the weight of, oh, my grandfather had this company, my father had this company, and passed it down to me, and I'm really struggling with it. They have tremendous weight. And so when you help that situation, and I was able to help in a lot of situations like that, they business owners talk with each other. So,
Yeah.
one
Word
one per
spreads quickly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
all it takes is one breakfast and someone being like, "Oh my God, we're having this. We can't do this sort of thing," and everyone's just kind of like, "Oh yeah, call this guy. He'll get you sorted." Yeah, word spreads quickly.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's
So what was unique is that when you get called in to do a turnaround, it's not when like everything's going great.
no.
Hey, we got highly profitable and everything's good. It's usually when you're very, very dysfunctional. And so that was always interesting. I always saw it as a puzzle. And going back to my roots, what I learned in the submarine force on leadership is what helped me to unlock a lot of those opportunities.
Yeah, there was years ago, people always thought that I should be getting in and doing that sort of thing because that's usually what I did for small businesses, especially
Mm,
on the marketing and communication side. So it was sometimes it was a lot of start. Some people they had hired someone they hadn't done much or whatever have you, and I would kind of come in and right size it all, get it all figured out and
mm.
sorted, and then start things moving forward. And you're absolutely right, business owners do talk, which is how I ended up with 10 clients in the same block at one point.
Yes,
Because they
yes,
just
it's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So it made making visiting everyone very easy because I could just park my car at one location and then just go talk to everybody. So yes, but it's fascinating how you get into all of that. And I think maybe I'm finally old enough to really do it now. But
You understand it then though. Yeah, so you fully understand it. And if you've
well, I
done it
mean,
at the lower levels, you can do it at the
yeah.
higher levels too.
Yeah, I mean, it's oftentimes it's a lot of processes. It's changing the language about things. It's changing the thinking about things. I find a lot. That's a lot of what I've done with my current media and book publishing gig is changing how we think about things, how we talk about things. a lot of businesses don't get brand correctly, so they're not communicating themselves to the public. People don't know why they would go there or why they would choose you, sort of
Yes.
thing. And it's my
Perfect.
job to go in and find that special thing that makes you kind of stand out from the crowd. And get in front of the right marketing. Any marketing job is the same question: who's our audience? Now we get in front of them. That's marketing in a sentence. That's
Right.
all it is. That's the same problem. I don't care how many systems you have, how many
Right.
MBAs with marketing
Yeah.
specializations you hire. If they can't answer that question, fire them immediately.
Yes.
Um, and you can add on the it's how we attract them, it's how we keep them, it's how we retain them, and we can talk about lifetime revenues, and we can talk about monthly recurring revenues, all this stuff, but nothing matters unless you can answer that question: who's our audience, how we get in front of them. um and I've had, been in interviews where people's jaws have been on the floor because they'd never thought about their marketing that way. Like, sort of thing. And it's kind of like, yeah, it's like, okay, you've got someone posting on Instagram, but is your brand visual enough to that platform make sense for you? Is your audience there at all? Okay, you're still sending out direct mail. Not necessarily a bad decision, even in 2025.
Yeah.
But my first question is that where your audience is, sort of thing? And so it's changing language, it's changing all this type of thing. Um, and that's a
Isn't
lot
that
of what
isn't
I've
that fun though? Isn't that fun though, Cameron? It's like a puzzle, and then
yeah.
you get, and sometimes people have blind spots, and you get to really help them and serve them. It's awesome.
I convinced four dudes who worked in a gun shop who did not know what social media was to start making videos on Instagram, which I think was the peak of my achievement.
Yeah, it's
I
awesome.
walk in them kind of like, yeah, we're gonna get you guys on social media and get more people taking your classes and all this type of thing, and they were but then I made it fun. I made it a game, and they really got into it. And all of a sudden, they're posting videos of them pretending to shoot the giant 50 cal in their showroom. And I'm kind of like, 3 weeks ago, none of you even had Instagram installed on your phone.
It's so
Now you're
awesome.
pretending you're, shooting the Viet Cong, like, sort of thing. So, no, it is fun. It is magical, but it really is about, a language shift. I mean, for them, it was a wonderful thing because that's part of where their audience was. It also, they didn't have any visual assets. They weren't communicating their brand in a visual way. And at that time, that was very new for a lot of medium-sized businesses. Well, this is 2013. So we're really at the front wave
Wow.
of social media.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but it was not, businesses weren't used to communicating themselves that way. And some businesses have a great product, have great people. They don't know how to represent themselves in public. Anyway, enough about me. Back to you. The point of all this being is that it requires a lot of changing language in how we think about things. And I am fascinated by the stories and how that you've done that even in something like manufacturing, which is not glamorous, but is vitally important. And making all the little, and sometimes it's a bunch of small stuff, those little small things along the way that gets people excited to do something, or empowers someone, or make something more efficient, sort of thing. It's a magical moment.
Oh, absolutely is. Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to ask, kind of, because we're getting close to time, because I've gone on for too long, as I'm wont to do. um is a lot of people listen to me writing in commute. What's one thing someone could do today while they're driving to work listening to us, um that could empower their team to do a little bit better today? What's that one thing they could implement this morning that's going to make a difference?
Yeah. So I think the one thing is our number one key of fast attack leadership is make sure you are connecting people to your mission. What we have found, Cameron, is that we've done this with over 500 companies. We find that the leadership team, when we ask them what the mission of the company is, the leadership team is only 9% aligned on their mission. And so imagine if you're only 9% aligned to the top, imagine what everyone below you is. They can't be more than 9% aligned. If they are, it's luck, and you don't build a business on luck. And so this is a step, Cameron, that a lot of people just overlook. Yeah, we have our mission statement, it's on the wall. What we found is very powerful. The one thing that you can do today, take your mission statement and get your team together, and for 15 or 20 minutes, challenge the team to code word it. Put it into a code word, 2 words, 3 words, apply an image to it, and then share it with everybody in the company. And so what we found is just by doing that, average alignment to the mission, which drives engagement, which drives everything else. When you have engaged employees, things become a lot easier. So the number one thing you can do is you can make sure your mission statement's really easy to understand. That's number one. Number two is start wrapping what we call our stories around that, of how the product or service that you provide is making an impact in a human's life. And those two things together, that will allow you to connect people to the mission. And then every single day, like they should almost be throwing up, Cameron, when you come up. They go, oh no, here comes Cameron. He's going to talk about the mission. Like seriously. I was listening to John Denver song the other day. Thank God I'm a country boy. In 3 minutes and 43 seconds, he said that 28 times. And so when you were done with the song, and you can do anything, you do Slim Shady, when you were done with the song, you knew what the name of the song was. And equivalent to that is if every 30 minutes, you would say your mission statement somehow in some type of context. And so the number one thing that you can do, and it makes everything else a lot easier, if you want to empower people and push decision-making down, is connect people to the mission, get them engaged about what they're doing, and have them know how what they're doing is making a difference in the world and how they connect together with that. That's the number one thing you can do.
No, that's we're in the middle of a bit of a changing mission. Again, I have calls to make later about all of that. I think getting everyone back on board with where we're going is very important. No, that's such a good suggestion. All right. Well, we've reached the point of the show where we do plugs. So, let us know where we can keep up with you online, follow you, catch up with you, read what you're working on, all this type of thing.
Yeah, so I'm on all the social medias. We'll send all the links over to you, Cameron, and maybe you can put in the bottom down below. But we're on Instagram, LinkedIn. I have a podcast called the Surfacing Leaders Podcast. If you're interested in learning more about conversations and leadership, and that's the best way to reach me.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much. This is absolutely fascinating. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Cameron.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.